Hey guys, today I'm going to be breaking down my process of shading these assets in an anime style. Also stick around to the end where I'll be talking about my future videos and also giving a sneak peek of a current work in progress. Also, a quick warning, this tutorial might end up being somewhat long since I'll be recording my whole process and just talking through the whole thing in real time with very little editing. Hopefully this video style will work well since I really don't have time to edit a shorter video. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoy. Let's get right on into it. Hey guys, editing Aloe here. As I'm editing this, I'm noticing a few errors or a few things that I forgot to mention. So as it goes through, keep an eye out for some text that I'll drop in going a bit more in depth on a few things that I missed or explaining a few extra things. Okay, to start off, let's head into render view, which is where we'll be doing basically all our work. I'll have these models set up with outlines already and materials assigned. So you won't have to worry about that. First, we should set up our scene. So under the scene settings, or the render properties, we're going to enable ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. And I like to crank these settings all the way up. If your PC can't handle it though, don't worry. Also, shadows. We won't touch this right now, but we'll come back to it in a bit. The second thing we'll do is open up the shader editor. This is just something that I like to do. I like to set my world color to black, but I don't like how that looks. So I use this quick node setup to keep what I see as the default, but what the shaders see as black. I just find that the black color keeps Toon shading more reliable with different assets and scenes and everything. Okay, now that that's all set up, we don't have any light in our scene, so let's go ahead and add a sun lamp. Give it some rotation. Generally for Toon shading, I find that 3 is a good strength for suns. It all depends on what you want though. Okay, to get started, let's start by texturing the wood. We'll start by getting a kind of base color. I used a noise texture from what I remember. Add texture coordinates. Mess with the mapping to kind of stretch it out. Give it some more of that wood feel. Bring up the scale some, looking good. Then I'm going to use a mix RGB using this as the factor. Choose some kind of woody colors. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. Let's see. I have my original shader up here so I can reference it if I ever forget what we're doing. Yeah, this is good. One strategy I use a lot when working with colors, which is what you do in Toon shading, is I use a lot of the hue saturation node. This is a really handy node because you can kind of just tweak the colors if you don't like them. For me, I'm gonna leave the hue about the same. Maybe mess with this a bit to get what I like, right? I think that looks good. Next up, we want to bring in our shadow mask. So to do that, we can just use a simple diffuse BSDF and then drop on the shader to RGB node. We won't see any change yet. And to get those nice harsh shadows, like the constant, I don't know, to get the nice harsh shadows, we'll use, most people will use a color ramp and then just like bring this up very far and like clamp them together, or use a constant color ramp and just drag this along. Personally, I like to have a number that I can just input or mess with. So we're going to use a math node set to greater than, and then we can just mess with this value to choose the shadow. Once we have something we like, maybe bring this down a bit. Yeah, there we go. No, like, yeah, I'm feeling it. Okay, once you have a threshold that you like, there are two ways that we can add the shadows. One would be using a mix RGB set to multiply, which does the job fine. We can control the strength of the shadows, and this looks alright, you know. But if we wanted to make the shadows a bit more bluish, which in a lot of scenes looks very nice, we can instead put the shadow mask into the factor of the mix RGB, set it back to mix, and add a new hue saturation node. Plug this in and plug this in over here. We'll need to switch this so that this is the shadow color. Now we can bring the value down. This will look the same as the multiply node, but we can also mess with the hue. You can make it a bit, you know, more yellowish, a bit more red. Also the saturation we can take down a bit. And you know, this kind of gives a nice effect. It helps to vary it more. Next up, I'm going to show you guys two useful custom nodes I used when shading this scene. The first one being called decolor. Let's drop it right on there and I'll show you how it works. You can immediately see the effect. The colors are all kind of now more varied. There's random splotches of color. Basically, I have set up some controls here, changed the scale, the seed, also the threshold. I usually set these very, very low, so it's very slight. I just kind of feel that it gives a nice varied look, sort of makes it feel a bit more natural and hand-drawn. It's quite subtle, but it helps a bit. The second one we'll tackle in a little bit after we've done a bit more shading. Okay, next up, let's shade this desk. Next up, let's shade the metal. We can remove the principled shader. Actually, let's just, from the wood, we can kind of copy a lot of this to start with. Let's just grab the whole thing and drop it into the metal shader. For now, let's mute the decolor and mess with the noise. Let's reset the scale. Reset that to 1. Then I'm going to use object coordinates for this to stop the stretching on the noise. And I'm going to choose something close to white, a little bluish, for the actual color of the metal. Something like that, yeah. Let's make this hue for the shadows a little bluer. There we go. Yeah, it looks decent as a base color, but you can see there's nothing that makes it look metallic, right? There's no reflections or anything, which generally there should be. So, how we can add those back in is with this handy node called layer weight. There are two outputs, the fresnel and facing. I prefer to use facing since it goes from black to white, from 0 to 1. It's easier to work with. This is kind of just giving us a nice mask. It sort of helps fake the effect of it reflecting things. Yeah, so let's go ahead and mix this in before the decolor, after the shadows. We're gonna put this into the factor, and let's preview what this looks like. Kind of overwhelming, so there are two things we can do. We can mess with this blend value and also add a color add to help us kind of clamp these values. Let's go ahead and set this up to white to make it clear what's happening. Bring this way up. There we go. Now we get this kind of nice sheen. Actually, let's set this to lighten so that we still get, let's see, we just switch these, and let's drop this in. I think we need to invert this. Okay, this is not working. Let me see. You know what, screw this. Put it back to mix. What happened? Bring the blend back up. Okay, there we go. We have this nice effect. Now that's nice and all, but it's still kind of plain. So why not just add more? Plug this in here. And for this one, let's offset it. Let's make this kind of like almost like a rim. On the back, we'll see it. And also, let's bring down the strength. Bring the bottom up. There we go. Sort of a nice effect. In the original, I think I had 3 iterations, but for this, we'll just use 2. Now we can drop the decolor back on there. Wait for it to load. And yeah, that's looking pretty nice. Then the desk metal and the leg metal they're different materials, so let's copy this over here and just preview that, and it's looking pretty nice. By the way, if your shadows are kind of glitchy and low quality, we can come back to we can come back to the shadow panel, and if you bring the cascade size up, that'll basically increase the quality of your shadows. Okay, so there are 2 main things left. One, you might be wondering why we enabled screen space reflections at the beginning, and I'll show you right now. Actually, in my classroom, you can see that some of the metal and some of the wood as well actually does reflect real things around them. It's not all faked like this metal. So we can go ahead and add that since that uses the screen space reflections. We can start by grabbing a glossy BSDF. And to make this more clear, let's add some more objects. Let's get a monkey in here. Okay, so we're reflecting the monkey. Let's bring the roughness down so we can see the reflection. We're reflecting the monkey. Now, how do we add this to our shader, right? The logical first step to do would be to put a shader to RGB on it, and as we can see, that does not work. Shader to RGB only works on diffuse shaders, like it doesn't work with glossiness or transparent or transmission. So, to get around this, instead of using RGB, instead of mixing RGB values, we can just mix shaders, right? So let's put our color into an emission shader. This will just be basically our color but converted to a shader. And now, instead of mixing our shaders, let's add them. This might seem a bit strange, but let's bring this stuff all back over here. This might seem a bit strange, but if the shader loads, then I can show you. We should be getting reflections. Why is this not working? I've had this problem before in a previous recording of this tutorial, and I switched to a different version of Blender which fixed it, but I'm really not sure what's happening right. Okay, this is very strange. I do not know what to say, but this should be basically adding the reflections to the model. It seems to be somehow glitching right now. I just tried to open it in some other versions of Blender. They crashed very nicely, and one of them even displayed pink when I tried to look at this shader, so I have no idea why it's not working. But this basic idea will let you add real reflections to your shader if your Blender is working properly. Also, just a note, even for stuff that's not shiny like metal, I usually, like this wood, I'd usually add this to that as well, just like this. I would just also bring the roughness on the glossy BSDF a little higher so that it, what am I saying? I'd usually bring the roughness on the glossy BSDF a little higher so that the reflections aren't sharp like they would be on a shiny surface. They're just kind of subtle and just barely showing up. I don't know why, again, we can't see these reflections, but yeah, I guess it's a lost cause for this tutorial. Also, if you're using this setup and it's actually working, and you're seeing this strange white area, that's coming from your lights in your scene. So to fix that, you can just bring the specular on your lights down to 0, and now it won't show up. But the lighting will still work because that's all based off of the diffuse. Yeah, this still isn't working. I guess we'll have to skip it for this tutorial. It's a really neat trick. Maybe I can open my... I'll open up the classroom scene after this and show you guys. Okay, one more thing to touch on. If we add a light, another light, say a point, let's bring the specular down on this too. If we change the color of the light, nothing actually changes on our shader, right? It doesn't factor the light color into it at all, which we might want it to, right? So let's set this to something obvious like purple, and let's start implementing that. Let's delete that for now. Let's see. For this, I have a node group actually called colored light, kind of to the point. I'll show you how the node group works, and then I'll show you what's actually inside of it. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Suddenly, it's actually coloring our scene with light. That's pretty nice, right? It works with any color. You can bring it around. You can have multiple lights with different colors. It basically works how you'd expect it, right? It just, that's the light coloring the object. How this works is pretty simple actually. It still uses the diffuse. Basically by using the saturation from our shader to RGB, it gives us a mask for where there's colored light, and then basically we can use that to mix the color from our shader to RGB back on top of our shader. Yeah, it's a pretty handy node group. I used it in my classroom a lot. Yeah, let's quickly apply it to the metal and get rid of these shaders since they're not working. Plug the color into the color. And now you can see it's also affecting the metal, right? Okay, great. That's kind of it for the whole texturing part. I'm really bummed that the reflections for some reason aren't working. I really have no idea what's up with that, but hopefully you guys can get it to work. I'm going to quickly open up my classroom file and show you guys some of the stuff that we just worked on today in action. Okay, here we are in my classroom scene. You can see if I go look at one of the desks, let me turn the selectability off for the volume. If I look at one of the desks, you'll see some reflections kicking in. Hello, reflections? Oh shoot, wait. Okay, it seems reflections are still bugged. I'm gonna put up a little video of my render and you'll actually be able to see the reflections there, showing up on like some of the metal and even some of the wood. Okay, then a lot of this stuff is basically shaded with the same method as what we used for the wood especially. Just kind of get the shadow mask, generate a base color. Generally it's pretty simple stuff, just textures and just like procedural textures and some vector stuff as well, but it's pretty simple. And then just mixing between the shadow and the light with the shadow mask is the factor. Yeah, it's honestly just a lot of simple stuff put together into this scene to make it more robust, right? I think that's mostly it for this tutorial. In the future, I'd love to talk about the more realistic style of anime that I worked on. You can see it in the laundromat, and also actually I have a new project that is a similar style. Let me actually open that up and show you guys, since I think it's pretty interesting. Hopefully this will be out in the next week or two with the full showcase on YouTube. Okay. I used a lot of cool tricks in this, so I'm really looking forward to showing it off. In this, I actually also have a full 3D character instead of just a cutout, which is something I've been working towards for a while. Okay, here we go. This is the scene that I've been working on. Right now it's not obviously an anime scene, but with the character in there in the final, it'll be more obvious. As you can see, this is all on Eevee, right? It looks very similar to Cycles. This scene, I originally made the scene for Cycles, but decided to try to port it to Eevee, and overall it looks quite good. Obviously there are a few light spilling issues you can see in the corners, but generally I'm honestly myself quite impressed with how well it went. Also, I used some cool effects to get this compositing in the viewport that I'm looking forward to hopefully talk about in a future video. Yeah, I think my next video I'll talk about the realistic laundromat scene as well as this scene and kind of compare the pros and cons of Eevee and Cycles for this more realistic style of anime. Anyhow, I think that's kind of it. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to show you guys. Also, if there was anything that was unclear, feel free to drop a comment and I can try to clarify. Yeah, that's it. Bye.